A woman walked into a town that didn't want her, climbed a mountain no one dared approach, and knocked on the door of a man the entire community had condemned. What happened next shattered everything Coldwater Bluff thought it knew about guilt, redemption, and the price of choosing love over fear. This is Clara's story, a tale of courage that defied judgment, silence that spoke louder than accusations, and two broken people who built something unbreakable from the ruins of scandal. Stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Millard's General Store, and Clara Whitmore stepped down into the dust of Coldwater Bluff, with nothing but a weathered trunk and a letter folded in her coat pocket. The afternoon sun cut harsh shadows across the main street, and she could feel eyes on her before her boots even settled on the ground. She didn't look back at the driver, didn't wave, just stood there, one hand on the trunk's leather handle, taking in the town that would either become her home or her biggest mistake. Coldwater Bluff wasn't much to look at. A scatter of wooden buildings, a church with peeling paint, a saloon that had seen better decades. Mountains rose up behind it all like sentinels, dark with pine and shadow. And somewhere up there, hidden in those trees, lived the man she'd come to marry. "You sure about this, miss?" The driver's voice carried skepticism and something that might have been concern. "Still time to get back on. Next town's only 3 hours east." Clara turned to face him. He was older, weathered, the kind of man who'd seen enough foolishness to recognize it on sight. "I'm sure," she said. Her voice came out steady, which was more than she felt inside. He shook his head, climbed back up to his seat. "Your funeral." The words hung in the air as the coach pulled away, wheels grinding against packed dirt. Clara watched it go, that last connection to the world she'd left behind disappearing around the bend. Then she picked up her trunk, heavier than it looked, and turned toward the store. The bell above the door jangled as she pushed inside. 3 men stood at the counter, mid-conversation, and all 3 went silent the moment they saw her. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles that caught the light, straightened up. "Help you with something?" "I need directions," Clara said, setting the trunk down. Her back ached from the journey. 2 days on that coach, sleeping in fits, eating hard bread and dried meat. To Rowan Hale's property. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was thick, suffocating, the kind that pressed against your chest. One of the men, broad-shouldered with a mustache that drooped past his chin, let out a short laugh that held no humor. "You lost, lady." "No." Clara met his gaze without flinching. "I'm exactly where I need to be." "Rowan Hale," the clerk repeated like he was testing the words. "You family?" "Not yet." The broad-shouldered man's expression shifted from amusement to something harder. "You one of those mail-order types? Coming out here to—" "That's my business," Clara cut in. Not sharp, but firm. "Not yours. I asked for directions, not commentary." The clerk cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I don't know what you've heard or what arrangement you think you have, but Rowan Hale isn't the kind of man—" "I know exactly what kind of man he is." Clara's hands were steady on the counter now. "I've read his letters for 6 months. I know more than you think I do." "Letters?" The third man, older, with silver in his beard, spoke for the first time. "Words on paper don't tell you what a man's capable of. Don't tell you what he's done." Clara turned to him. "They tell me enough. Now, are you going to point me in the right direction, or do I need to start asking around town until someone does?" The clerk exchanged glances with the others. Finally, he sighed. "Trail starts past the old mill, north end of town. Follow it up into the hills. About 2 hours on foot if you don't get lost. House sits in a clearing near the ridge." "Thank you." "Miss," the clerk leaned forward, his voice dropping, "I'd be doing you a disservice if I didn't warn you. Whatever Rowan told you in those letters, it's not the full picture. Man's got a past that ain't settled. Town's got long memories." "Then maybe," Clara said quietly, "the town should learn to forget." She picked up her trunk and walked back out into the sunlight before any of them could respond. The trail wasn't marked, but it was clear enough. Packed earth where boots had walked before, branches broken back at shoulder height. Clara followed it past the mill, which stood silent and skeletal against the tree line, its wheel frozen mid-turn like time had stopped caring. The climb was harder than she'd expected. Her trunk kept catching on roots, and twice she had to stop and rest, sitting on fallen logs while her breathing steadied. The air thinned as she went higher, cooler, carrying the scent of pine and something else. Smoke, maybe, though she couldn't see any. She thought about the letters as she walked. 6 months of correspondence, started on a whim through an advertisement she'd seen in a Philadelphia newspaper. Man seeking companionship, remote location, honest work, no expectations beyond mutual respect. It had been the last line that caught her attention, the honesty of it, the lack of pretense. Rowan's first letter had been short, almost curt. He'd told her about the mountain, the isolation, the work he did cutting timber and hunting game. He hadn't mentioned why he lived alone. That came later, in the third or fourth exchange, when Clara had asked directly. There was a fire, he'd written. They said I started it. Burned down the Pritchard barn, killed 3 horses. I didn't. But proving innocence isn't the same as being believed. She'd written back asking why he stayed if the town had turned on him, because leaving would look like running. And I've done enough of that in my life. There was something in those words that resonated. Clara knew about running, knew about starting over in places that didn't ask questions. She'd been doing it since she was 16, since the day her father's debts caught up with him, and she'd found herself suddenly alone in a city that chewed up girls like her and spit them out, forgotten. She'd worked in factories, in kitchens, in boarding houses where the walls were thin and the pay was thinner. She'd saved every penny she could, kept her head down, learned how to be invisible. But invisibility got exhausting after a while. And then she'd seen that advertisement, and something in her chest had pulled tight with recognition. Maybe I'm tired of running too, she'd thought. So here she was, climbing a mountain to meet a man the world had decided wasn't worth knowing. The trees thinned as she reached higher ground, and suddenly the clearing opened up in front of her like a held breath released. The house wasn't much. Single story, rough-hewn logs, chinked with mud and moss. A stone chimney rose from one end, thin smoke curling from it into the gray sky. There was a shed off to the side, tools leaning against it, and a woodpile stacked neat and high. Everything about the place spoke of function, of survival stripped down to its essentials. And standing in front of the house, axe in hand, was Rowan Hale. He didn't move as Clara approached, just stood there, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. He was taller than she'd imagined, broad across the shoulders, with dark hair that fell past his collar, and a beard that hadn't seen a razor in months. His clothes were worn, but clean. Flannel shirt, canvas pants, boots that had walked 1,000 miles. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark, guarded, carrying a weight that letters could never fully convey. Clara. Her name came out flat, not quite a question. Rowan. She set the trunk down, her arms grateful for the relief. I made it. Shouldn't have. The words landed hard, but Clara didn't flinch. You wrote me. Told me how to find you. I also told you to reconsider. He leaned the axe against the chopping block, wiped his hands on his pants. Multiple times. And I told you I'd made up my mind. Rowan exhaled through his nose, a sound caught between frustration and something else. He looked past her, toward the trail she'd climbed. Anyone see you come up? The men in the store. They weren't thrilled about giving directions. I bet. He turned back to her, and for the first time she saw something crack in that guarded expression. Uncertainty, maybe. Or fear. You don't know what you're walking into. Then tell me. I did. In the letters. You told me facts, Clara said. You told me about a fear and an accusation and a town that wouldn't listen. You didn't tell me what it cost you. Rowan's jaw tightened. What it costs me is my business. Not if you're asking me to stay here. Not if you're asking me to be part of this. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of coming rain. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, shrill and lonely. Finally, Rowan nodded toward the house. You hungry? It wasn't an answer, but it was something. Inside, the house was spare but not uncomfortable. A single room divided by function. A bed in one corner, a table, and 2 chairs in another, a cast-iron stove against the wall. Shelves held supplies, canned goods, flour, salt, coffee. A rifle hung above the door, within easy reach. Rowan moved to the stove, his movements efficient, practiced. He didn't look at Clara as he worked, but she could feel him tracking her presence, aware of every shift and breath. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the table. Clara did, lowering herself into the chair carefully. Her legs ached from the climb. She watched as Rowan pulled out bread, cheese, dried venison. Simple food, but more than she'd had all day. He set the plate in front of her, then took the other chair, his own plate smaller. They ate in silence, the only sound the scrape of knife against wood and the occasional pop from the stove. "You're quieter than I expected," Rowan said eventually. Clara looked up. "So are you." "I don't talk much anymore. Gets easy, living alone." "I can imagine." "Can you?" There was an edge to the question. "Really?" Clara set down her knife. "My father drank himself to death when I was 16, left me with nothing but his debts, and a landlord who didn't care that I was barely more than a kid. I spent the next 10 years moving from city to city, taking whatever work I could find, sleeping in rooms so small I could touch both walls at once. I know what alone feels like. Maybe not the same way you do, but I know it." Rowan studied her, his expression unreadable. "That why you answered the ad? Looking for something different?" "Looking for something real." "Real." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "Nothing real about this, Clara. You're chasing a story you made up in your head from letters that can't tell you the whole truth." "Then tell me the whole truth now." "Why? So you can decide I'm not worth the trouble and head back down that mountain before dark? Or so I can decide to stay?" The word hung between them, stay, and Clara saw something flicker across Rowan's face. Hope, maybe, buried so deep he didn't recognize it himself. He pushed back from the table, stood, walked to the window. Outside, the light was fading, the sky turning the color of bruised fruit. "The fire happened 3 years ago," he said, his back to her. "August. Drought had the whole valley dried out, and everyone was on edge about sparks. I'd been working on the Pritchard place earlier that week, fixing a fence line. We'd had words, nothing serious, just the usual back and forth about pay and hours. But when that barn went up, when those horses died screaming, everyone remembered those words." Clara stayed quiet, letting him talk. "Sheriff brought me in, asked questions I'd already answered. Where was I that night? Could anyone verify? Did I have reason to want Pritchard hurt?" Rowan's hands curled into fists against the windowsill. "I told them the truth. I was here, alone. No witnesses, no alibi. Just me and the mountain and a whole town ready to believe the worst." "But you were cleared," Clara said. "Eventually. Took 2 months. They found evidence. Accelerant residue that didn't match anything I owned, boot prints that weren't mine. Turned out it was Pritchard's own son, angry about being cut out of the will, trying to frame me and collect insurance. But by then," he trailed off, shook his head. "Damage was done. People don't forget, don't forgive. I became the man who might have done it, even after proof said otherwise. So you stayed." "So I stayed." He turned to face her. "Because running would have confirmed what they already thought, that I was guilty, that I had something to hide." Clara stood, moved closer. "And now? Now I live alone on a mountain, and the town pretends I don't exist, which is fine by me." "Is it?" Rowan's expression hardened. "What do you want me to say, Clara? That I'm lonely? That I put that ad in the paper because the silence was starting to eat me alive? That I wrote those letters to you because it felt like talking to someone who didn't already know my name and hate it? I want you to say the truth. The truth is you shouldn't be here. The truth is I'm not the man you think I am. The truth is—" He stopped, jaw working. "The truth is I don't know how to do this anymore, how to be around people, how to let someone in." Clara reached out, placed her hand on his arm. He flinched, but didn't pull away. "Then we'll figure it out," she said quietly. "Together. You say that now. Wait until winter sets in. Wait until you've been stuck in this house for days with nothing but wind and snow and me. Wait until the town starts talking, starts treating you the way they treat me. Let them talk." Easy to say, easy to mean. Clara's grip tightened. "I didn't come all this way to turn around at the first sign of difficulty, Rowan. I came because I read your letters and I saw something worth finding, something honest. And if you think I'm going to run just because things are hard, then you don't know me at all." Rowan stared at her, something raw and unguarded in his eyes. Then, slowly, he placed his hand over hers. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, he said, or the most foolish. Maybe both. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Yeah, maybe both. They didn't talk much more that night. Rowan gave Clara the bed, insisted on it despite her protests. He pulled a bedroll from a trunk and spread it on the floor near the stove, methodical and quiet. Clara lay in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar sounds, the creak of logs settling, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the steady rhythm of Rowan's breathing across the room. She'd made her choice. There was no going back now, even if she'd wanted to. And she didn't want to. When morning came, pale and cold through the single window, she found Rowan already awake, stoking the fire. He glanced up as she sat up, hair tangled and eyes heavy with sleep. "Coffee's ready," he said. "You drink it black?" "However it comes." He poured 2 cups, handed her one. The metal was warm against her palms, the steam rising to fog her vision. "I've got work to do today," Rowan said, "checking trap lines, cutting firewood. You can stay here if you want, rest." Clara shook her head. "I'll come with you. It's rough terrain. I made it up the mountain, didn't I?" He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Suit yourself, but keep up. I'm not slowing down." "Didn't ask you to." They set out after a quick breakfast. More bread, some jam Clara hadn't noticed the night before. The morning air bit sharp and clean, and Clara could see her breath clouding in front of her as they walked. Rowan led them through the trees, moving with the ease of someone who knew every root and stone by heart. He didn't talk, didn't point things out, just walked. Clara followed, her boots finding purchase on uncertain ground, her eyes adjusting to the filtered light through the canopy. The first trap was empty. So was the second. At the third, they found a rabbit, already stiff with cold. Rowan reset the trap with quick practice movements, his hands steady even in the chill. "You eat rabbit?" he asked, holding it up. "I'll eat whatever you cook." "Good, because that's mostly what we've got up here. Rabbit, venison, whatever's in season." They kept moving. Clara's legs burned with the effort of keeping pace, but she didn't complain, didn't ask to stop. She watched Rowan instead, the way he moved, the way he scanned the forest with sharp, careful eyes. This was his world. This was where he made sense. By midday, they'd checked all the traps and cut enough wood to fill the sled Rowan had brought. He loaded it methodically, stacking the logs with precision. "You're stronger than you look," he said, glancing at Clara. "I've worked hard jobs." "I'm starting to believe that." They dragged the sled back together, the runners hissing against dirt and needles. Clara's arms shook with the effort, but she gritted her teeth and pulled. When they reached the house, Rowan stopped, turned to her. "You didn't have to prove anything today." "Wasn't trying to prove anything, just trying to help." "Well?" He looked away, something almost like embarrassment crossing his face. "You did. So, thanks." It wasn't much, but coming from Rowan, it felt like a lot. Well, days turned into weeks. Clara fell into the rhythm of the mountain, waking early, working hard, sleeping deep. She learned which plants Rowan harvested for tea, which wood burned hottest, how to skin a rabbit without wasting meat. She learned the silence, too, the way it could be comfortable instead of oppressive. And slowly, Rowan began to open. Not all at once, not in grand gestures or long confessions, but in small moments. A comment about the weather, a story about a deer he'd seen once, a question about her life before. They cooked together, ate together, worked together. And somewhere in all that, the walls started to come down. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Rowan asked, "You ever regret coming here?" Clara looked up from the socks she was mending. "No. You? Regret writing those letters?" "Sometimes." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending up sparks. "But then you do something stubborn, and I remember why I did it." "Stubborn?" "You walked up a mountain with a trunk full of your whole life. You didn't know me. Didn't know if I'd even let you in the door. That's not brave, Clara. That's stubborn as hell." She smiled. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." They lapsed into comfortable quiet, the fire crackling between them. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said eventually. "Depends on the question." "Why didn't you leave? After everything. Why stay here where people hate you?" Rowan was quiet for a long time, then, "Because if I left, they'd win. They'd get to write the story, say I ran because I was guilty, and I'm not giving them that. I'm not giving them me. Clara nodded slowly. I understand that. Do you? My whole life, people have told me who I was supposed to be. Quiet, grateful, small. And I spent years trying to fit into that space. But it never felt right. Coming here, she met his eyes. This is the first time I felt like I could be something other than what people expected. Rowan's expression softened. Yeah, I get that. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Winter was coming. Clara could feel it in the air, in the way the cold settled deeper each night. Storm's rolling in, Rowan said, reading the wind like a language. Could be a rough one. We ready for it? We will be. We. The word settled warm in Claire's chest. They spent the next day securing everything, stacking more wood, checking the roof for weak spots, bringing in extra supplies from the shed. By evening, the first flakes were falling, fat and slow. Clara stood in the doorway, watching the snow blanket the clearing. Behind her, Rowan moved about the house, lighting lamps, stoking the fire. First snow, she said. Won't be the last. No. She turned to look at him. But it's still something. Rowan met her gaze, and for a moment something passed between them. An understanding, a recognition. They were in this together now. Whatever came next, they'd face it side by side. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of wind howling through the trees, of snow piling high against the door, of being trapped inside with nothing but each other for company. And it was fine. Better than fine, actually. They talked more in those 3 days than they had in the previous weeks combined. Rowan told her about his childhood, about a mother who'd died young and a father who'd taught him to hunt and fish and survive. Clara told him about Philadelphia, about the boarding house and the factory work, and the night she'd decided she was done being invisible. They played cards with a worn deck Rowan produced from somewhere. They read aloud from the few books he had. They cooked elaborate meals just to pass the time, experimenting with spices and combinations that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. And when the storm finally broke, when the sun came out hard and bright against all that white, they stood together in the doorway, surveying the changed landscape. Beautiful, Clara murmured. Rowan glanced at her. Yeah, it is. But he wasn't looking at the snow. Winter deepened. The town below seemed to forget the mountain existed, which suited both of them fine. They had everything they needed: food, warmth, each other. Clara had stopped thinking about the letters, about the distance between words on paper and the reality of shared space. This was real now, all of it. She noticed things about Rowan she couldn't have known from writing. The way he always checked the door twice before bed. The way he tensed when unexpected sounds came from the forest. The way he sometimes woke in the night, breathing hard, like he'd been running from something in his dreams. One night, she woke to find him sitting at the table, head in his hands. Rowan? He looked up, and even in the dim light she could see the exhaustion in his face. Sorry. Didn't mean to wake you. You didn't. Clara got up, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, joined him at the table. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I don't know. He rubbed his face. Sometimes I forget, forget what happened, forget why I'm up here, and then I remember, and it's like it happened yesterday. The fire? The fire. The accusations. The way people looked at me. Like I was something dirty, something dangerous. His voice cracked. I can't get it out of my head, can't stop seeing their faces. Clara reached across the table, took his hand. You're not there anymore. Aren't I? I'm still on this mountain because of them, still hiding because they decided I was guilty. You're not hiding, you're surviving. What's the difference? The difference, Clara said firmly, is that hiding means you're afraid. Surviving means you're fighting, and you've been fighting every day since it happened. Rowan looked at her, something desperate in his eyes. I don't know how much longer I can keep fighting. Then let me help. That's why I'm here. You shouldn't have to. I want to. Clara squeezed his hand. You've been carrying this alone for 3 years. You don't have to anymore. For a long moment, Rowan didn't move. Then slowly, he turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. Letting people in. I know. I might mess it up. Probably. And you're still here. I'm still here. Rowan exhaled, something in his shoulders loosening. Okay. Okay. They sat like that until the first light crept through the window, hands clasped, silent but together. Spring came slowly to the mountain. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth and the stubborn green of new growth. Clara watched it happen with something like hope blooming in her chest. She'd been on the mountain for 5 months now. 5 months of learning and adapting and becoming something she'd never been before. A partner, a companion, a woman who chose her own path. Rowan had changed too. Not in obvious ways, but in small ones. He smiled more, talked more, let her see the parts of himself he'd kept buried. One afternoon, as they worked in the garden plot they'd started clearing, he said, "I've been thinking." Clara looked up from where she was pulling weeds. About? About going down to town. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. "You don't have to," Clara said carefully. "I know. But I want to. Or, I want to. Does that make sense?" "Yeah, it does." Rowan sat back on his heels, dirt on his hands, sun on his face. "I can't let them keep me up here forever. Can't let what happened define the rest of my life." "What changed?" He met her eyes. "You did." Clara's heart skipped. "Rowan, I mean it. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. But you made me remember what it feels like to want something more, to believe things could be different." He paused. "I want to try. Don't know if I can do it, but I want to try." Clara stood, brushed off her hands, moved closer. "Then we'll try together." "You'd come with me?" "Where else would I be?" Rowan stood too, and suddenly they were close, closer than they'd been before. Clara could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the scar above his left eyebrow she'd never asked about. "Clara," he said, his voice rough. "Yeah?" "I don't know how to say this without sounding." "Then don't say it." She kissed him, simple, direct, honest. And after a moment's hesitation, Rowan kissed her back, his hands coming up to frame her face like she was something precious. When they pulled apart, both breathing harder, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. "Took you long enough," Clara murmured. A startled laugh broke from his chest. "Was waiting for the right moment. And? And I got tired of waiting." They stood like that, wrapped in each other, the garden forgotten around them. Otium. The decision to go to town wasn't made lightly. They discussed it over several days, weighing risks and benefits. What they would say. How they would act. Whether it was worth the potential cost. In the end, Clara made the argument that decided it. "You can't build a life in fear," she said, "and that's what this is. Fear dressed up as caution. You want to move forward, then you have to stop letting them hold you back." So they went. The trail down felt different than it had going up. Clara walked beside Rowan this time, not behind him. They didn't talk much, but their hands brushed occasionally, a reminder of shared purpose. When they emerged at the edge of town, Clara saw Rowan's shoulders tense, his jaw set. "Hey," she said quietly. "You're not alone." He nodded, didn't speak, but his hand found hers and held on tight. They walked down the main street together. It was market day, and people crowded the square, farmers selling produce, women buying cloth, children running between stalls. The first person to see them was Mrs. Chen, who ran the fabric shop. Her eyes went wide, and she said something to the woman next to her. Like a ripple spreading across water, the news passed from person to person. Rowan Hale was back. Conversations died. People stopped and stared. Some with curiosity, some with hostility, some with something that might have been shame. Rowan kept walking, his face a mask. Clara matched his stride, her chin up, refusing to shrink under the weight of all those eyes. They made it to Millard's general store before anyone actually spoke. The clerk, the same thin man with spectacles, came around the counter, his expression complicated. "Rowan," he said. "Henry." Rowan's voice was flat. "We need supplies." "Sure, of course." Henry glanced at Clara. "Miss Whitmore, you're still... You stayed." "I did." "Right. Well," he cleared his throat. "What can I get you?" They gave him a list: flour, sugar, salt, coffee, basic staples. Henry gathered everything with nervous efficiency, clearly uncomfortable but trying. As he tallied the cost, the door opened behind them. Clara turned to see a man in his 60s, silver-haired, wearing a star on his vest. The sheriff. "Rowan," he said. Not friendly, but not hostile either. "Been a while?" "Sheriff Dalton." "Heard you were living up on the ridge still." "You heard right." Dalton's eyes moved to Clara. "And you are?" "Clara Whitmore." "She's with me," Rowan said, an edge to the words. "Figured as much." Dalton hooked his thumbs in his belt. "People are talking. People always talk." "True enough." The sheriff paused. "Look, I know there's bad blood. Know what happened wasn't fair to you, but you coming back like this, walking around town, it's going to stir things up." "I'm not here to stir anything," Rowan said. "I'm here to buy supplies and leave." "That all?" Rowan's jaw tightened. "What do you want me to say, Sheriff? That I'll keep hiding on that mountain so the good people of Coldwater Bluff don't have to feel uncomfortable? That I'll stay invisible so everyone can keep pretending they didn't destroy my life over a lie? That's not—" "It is exactly that." Rowan's voice was low, controlled, but Clara could hear the anger beneath it. "You cleared me, Sheriff, found the real culprit. But that didn't fix what was broken, didn't give me back what I lost. So don't stand there and tell me I'm the problem for showing my face." Dalton had the grace to look uncomfortable. "You're right. I'm sorry. What happened to you?" He shook his head. It wasn't justice. Not the kind that matters. The admission hung in the air, surprising in its honesty. "Doesn't change anything," Rowan said. "No, but maybe it's a start." They left the store with their supplies, the sheriff's words following them out into the sunlight. Clara could feel the town watching, judging, speculating, but she kept her head high and her hand in Rowan's. They were halfway to the trail when a voice called out, "Hail!" Both of them stopped. A man was approaching, younger, maybe 30, with blonde hair and a nervous energy. "Jacob Pritchard," Rowan said quietly. "The son, the one who'd actually started the fire." "I need to talk to you," Jacob said, stopping a few feet away. "We've got nothing to say. Please, just 5 minutes." Rowan looked at Clara, who nodded slightly. They didn't have to do this, but maybe they should. 5 minutes, Rowan said. Jacob glanced around, clearly aware of the attention they were drawing. "Not here. Can we—" "There's an alley behind the mercantile." They followed him, Clara's instincts on alert. But when they reached the relative privacy of the narrow space between buildings, Jacob just stood there, hands shaking. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't mean anything. I know I can't take back what I did, but I need you to hear it. I'm sorry." Rowan's expression was unreadable. "You're sorry. I was angry. At my father, at the world,